Also, if you're not going outside of that box of what you're normally getting, well, you're just going to keep up the status quo. And if you're that small organization, chances are you're looking at your financial sheets constantly. You're making sure that you can give everyone those paychecks and that you're growing and you're on the right trajectory. Well, I think you have to introduce diversity in many different ways to your team. And a lot of that is, diversity in every single way, but also neurodiversity. Let's get some different thought processes in here. Let's get some new, fresh ideas. That's going to keep us ahead and keep us different than anyone else doing the same thing we're trying to do.
On this week's episode of ClinOps Power Hour, I chat with Ballina Chang, VP of Strategic Growth at Clinical Research Fastrack. Lauren is not only an incredibly experienced and knowledgeable research professional, but a vocal champion for diversity in clinical trials and has been a mentor to hundreds of research professionals before and during her time at Clinical Research Fastrack. We're going to talk about how Lauren got into clinical research and then the journey that she's taken to where she is today, as well as talk about how to build a unicorn clinical operations team and the roles and profiles that you should be on the lookout for as you do so yourself. Whether you're a ClinOps leader or aspire to be one day, you're going to love this episode. So let's get into it. All right. Thanks so much, Lauren, for joining us today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a really long time. So I'm so happy that we finally get a chance to sit down and chat.
Awesome. I have been counting down the days until we could record this, Oliver. So I am super excited to be here.
Amazing. And I'm sure that everybody that's going to be tuning into this, either watching the video or listening to the episode afterwards, will really appreciate what we're going to talk about today, because I think there's a really, really interesting topic that I think you and the team at Clinical Research Fastrack is really going to be able to help with. So maybe before we kick things off and jump into some of the questions that I prepared for today that kind of help guide the conversation, maybe you could give me a bit of a background on you, the organization that you work for, just to give people some context into why you're here today and why we're chatting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Oliver. So my background, how did I get here? Let me dive into that first. So I kind of fell into clinical research, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that just said, "Ooh, me too," and their hands kind of shot straight up in the air. And we all have our own stories of how we uniquely tripped into the field and figured it out. I'm no different. And so back in 2010, I fell into the field, started as a research assistant and kind of worked my way up. I did everything from A to Z, and if there's something beyond Z, I think I did it too. My hat rack was kind of tipping over in that kind of quintessential research assistant position where you quickly become the coordinator and you realize that basically the entire study is on your shoulders. And it's wild because that's the entry level for most people. Long story short, after working on several investigator-initiated trials and helping with every aspect there, I moved on. I got my master's, found myself at Mayo Clinic then, where I was helping to develop a new research program under the oncology umbrella there. It was at that time when I really actually discovered my passion of mentoring, helping to build organizations, helping people to find their passion, but then move into something in life that allows them to live out that passion.
Obviously, you alluded to a little bit of the kind of first of all, your passion and around mentoring and growing individuals, but today you're doing that more formally within an organization. So maybe you could give us a bit of an overview of sort of what you're doing within that organization, what the organization does, and your role there today.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm with Clinical Research Fastrack currently, and I have been since 2016. I was actually first a contract instructor for us. I believe the first session I ever taught was good documentation practices. So all things LCOSC. I very quickly realized that this organization, Clinical Research Fastrack, is doing something incredibly important that the industry needs. We're solving a lot of issues through our training, through our boot camp. We're helping to solve the workforce issue. We're helping to diversify the workforce. We're helping organizations to really grow and build their internal infrastructure. And so I'm currently our vice president of strategic growth. And that growth is not just Fastrack's growth. Of course, we want to grow too. But it's really the growth of the individual as well as the growth of the organizations that we're interfacing with.
In the organization itself, obviously providing a number of different programs within the context of clinical research. You mentioned the boot camp, which I've had a lot of fun exploring, and a couple of other programs that you've worked on either at the individual level, but also at the corporate level, right? You're also working directly with organizations to help improve knowledge, skill sets, etc. Could you maybe dive into that a little bit?
Oh, of course. We did get started with that boot camp training. That's kind of our flagship program. And this is for individuals who want to get into the field of clinical research. So they've done their homework on clinical research. They fall into this catch-22 of you can't get a job without experience. You can't get experience without a job. Where does that leave you? In our classroom, hopefully. So we're able to upskill people, get them that GCP cert, get them those hands-on skills they need. And then we introduce them to our partners in the field and these organizations, whether they're site CROs or sponsors, scoop them up. And the rest is history, right? What we've realized, though, is that a lot of organizations want to do their own hiring, right? They want to do that interviewing. They want to find that right culture fit. They want to find those right transferable skills. But then those individuals still need upskilled in clinical research. So we've been able to work with a lot of organizations to deliver what we call our workforce training program. So it's still a very accelerated program, but these organizations, they do their own hiring. They'll reach out to us and say, hey, we want to send, 5, 10, 15, 20 people through. And these are from everyone from the most entry level to we've had directors, managers, supervisors in our classroom getting that research foundation, right? I think one thing that's really awesome is we focus on soft skills. And that's what allows an organization to be successful when you hire people, you train people in those soft skills. So that's always been a focus of any of our trainings. But that workforce program has been great. And we've recently introduced kind of more of a subscription model to that, where it's not just a one-time training, because we know when you go to training, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. Most of it doesn't stick. So that subscription, or people get a year of unlimited training, right? They come to us, we get that quick shot, and then throughout the year, they're able to come back. So that's another kind of way we're helping to grow these organizations. And then lastly, we're jumping into PI training. This is incredibly important to be able to get more doctors in to help run and spearhead these trials.
I absolutely love that. And I actually had a really great conversation with somebody else a couple of weeks ago about the role of PIs within studies and how often they are so inadequately prepared to participate in research. And so much of the onus then moves on to other site staff that also may not be adequately prepared. And then it creates this really challenging environment where maybe the expectations from the sponsor or the CRO aren't being met. And then it creates that potentially bad taste for participating in research. So I love that that's an area that you guys are focusing on. Really, really cool.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and share a little quick point on that too. I think because when a physician goes to medical school, they're not trained in clinical research. They're trained in something that's not clinical research. They're writing case reports, or they're mining the EMR for, I don't know, something I'm sure they think is interesting, but that's not clinical research, right? Oh, they got to present at that national meeting. That's cool, great accolades, but that's not clinical research. So they're not trained in clinical research, nor are they getting their MBA. And clinical research is a business. So these folks often, they might have that clinical acumen to be able to oversee the trial, but how do they even get trials? How do they hire a research manager? How do they build their own infrastructure? That's completely foreign to them.
And I think that leads us really well into sort of our main kind of area of focus for today's discussion. And I think this was born out of our first discussion, but also something that I see, something that we see quite often, Montreal being an organization that really focuses on working with emerging, scaling biotech pharma sponsors, smaller boutique CROs who find it difficult to grow their business with the right resources, right? And so one of the main challenges that we tend to hear, and I'm sure this is something that you hear also, Lauren, is how do we build out a clinical operations team or a clinical team within a smaller organization like a small sponsor or a small CRO? And what are some of the challenges that maybe you see, Lauren, in from your perspective for organizations trying to maybe build out their first clinical team with a small startup?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's so many factors embedded in this. One of the first things that come to mind, or one of the first obstacles that these organizations usually encounter is, okay, we need someone pretty high level but we can't really afford someone that high level. So this is where I love finding that kind of scrappy entrepreneurial person who has that interest, who doesn't need that big paycheck because they haven't done it for 20 years, but they're resourceful and they have the soft skills to get it done. Yeah, you're going to need that fundamental knowledge base, of course, but just because someone hasn't done it a million times before doesn't mean they can't do it right now. So I think if you, in this first hire position, if you hire for the right attitude and for that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, there's resources out there for that person to go to and rely on. I think really these organizations need to find someone who shares the mission. When you find someone who shares the mission, that person is going to go the extra mile every single time. And that's really what that small organization needs. Someone who is first in, last out, makes it happen, asks the right questions, and then at the end of the day, just gets it done. Doesn't have to be that person that's done it before necessarily. And that kind of gets us into more of like, well, what transferable skills do we look for?
You kind of alluded to this in your answer there, which is a lot of smaller startups and maybe a lot of C-suite and executives at these sort of smaller growing biotechs, they tend to go for, let's try and find someone who's been there and done that before to lead those clinical programs. And that might be still important, right? But a lot of organizations, we tend to see, at least the smaller ones, are bringing on your VPs or your directors of ClinOps that are coming from a completely different environment, normally from a big pharma environment. And the issue with that big pharma environment is when you're working in a big company, you tend to have a lot more at your disposal. You have a lot more people that are available. You have probably lots more technology available to you. And then when you try and move that into a smaller organization, while those people have the knowledge and the expertise of managing clinical trials and overseeing clinical trials, you need to have that balance between making sure that you have a team in place that can actually manage within the reality that you find yourself in, which is probably not a large team, probably not a lot of technology just yet. And so I think what you were referencing is trying to find that kind of understudy or that sort of sidekick, if that's the right correct term, for someone that maybe hasn't had the luxury of being in an environment where they've got everything, everything at their disposal, because they're going to look at the problems, they're going to look at the situation differently, and having that entrepreneurial spirit certainly is going to help someone in a smaller team. So I absolutely really, really love that suggestion.
Yeah, I think almost if you can like find that person with like a chip on their shoulder, that person's going to work hard every time just to prove the other guy wrong. So it's almost like you're like, hey, did Big Pharma turn you down? Yeah. Okay. Well, come join my team. We'll show Big Pharma. All right.
I love that. Yeah. It's all about how you position the ultimate opportunity for people. And I totally agree. I think sometimes experience isn't everything. It certainly does get you ahead in some of those areas. But I think that there are, like you said earlier, soft skills. There's, people management, people interaction, communication skills that are just so very difficult to teach that maybe you don't always find. So one of the things, again, just to kind of focus in on this sort of small sponsor team, let's assume that we've got that kind of foundational hire, that kind of VP, lots of experience coming in, and now we're looking to sort of build out that group. What are some of the things that you find those types of organizations get caught up on? Maybe it's what you mentioned also, which is maybe hiring for someone that also has a ton of experience. Are there any other things that you kind of find that those groups maybe could do better, or things that they could try to navigate that path a little bit easier?
That's such a good question, because I do find the experience hang up is probably number one. Oh, well, you don't have the requisite number of years of experience. Insert arbitrary number here. Like, what, does something magical happen in after 2 years or 3 years? No. And also, most environments aren't exactly transferable, saying, oh, you've had 2 years of experience doing exactly this. Great. We'll come over here and you'll be a perfect fit right off the bat. Not necessarily. It's usually not apples to apples. The other thing I see too is just, not valuing the right transferable skills, or maybe not looking for the right transferable skills. I think a lot of times when we post jobs, we do a copy and paste. Oh, well, when we hired for this last year, this is the job description we used. It'll probably apply again. Well, are you still looking for the same type of candidate? It's probably not going to help your organization to grow. Also, if you're not going outside of that box of what you're normally getting, well, you're just going to keep up the status quo. And if you're that small organization, chances are you're looking at your financial sheets constantly. You're making sure that you can give everyone those paychecks and that you're growing and you're on the right trajectory. Well, I think you have to introduce diversity in many different ways to your team. And a lot of that is, diversity in every single way, but also neurodiversity. Let's get some different thought processes in here. Let's get some new, fresh ideas. That's going to keep us ahead and keep us different than anyone else doing the same thing we're trying to do.
And does that translate differently maybe into a large organization? Are some of those tenets still ring true there? Or is it going to be a little bit different when you're working maybe in sort of a mid to large sponsor or CRO?
I think it could ring true. And I say could simply because the larger an organization is, typically the more red tape, big bureaucratic system, oftentimes you're being plugged in as a cog in someone else's machine. Someone else has already figured it out. That's why, if you can't tell, I love small organizations where
Me too.
I use this analogy with our team all the time. Every time I welcome someone into our organization, I say, look, you're not getting on a cruise ship where you can't even feel that you're moving, right? You're going through the waves. You don't even know it. No, you're on a small boat with us. That means, if we capsize, that's everyone going under. But you can steer the direction in which we are heading. So come with value, bring what you have. And I think when people feel valued and feel like they have a voice and a seat at the table, no matter what role they have at the organization, that allows the organization to thrive. Now, obviously, those big behemoth companies probably started off pretty small, and maybe they grew organically, or maybe they kind of gobbled up some other players and became really big. Who knows? Probably a mix up there. But right, it's harder for an individual to really impact the direction that the cruise ship is heading.
There's also a lot of discussion, especially for people that are entering into clinical research for the first time, or maybe taking their first jump from their first position, where I think a lot of people have that sentiment where it's like, well, I'm going to go work at a big company first to get experience, and then I'll go and work at a small company. Is that something that your team or you would recommend, or are there benefits to maybe going the other route and saying, well, I'm going to kind of throw myself into a scrappier environment where I'm probably going to learn faster, where I'm going to have a bigger impact, where I'm going to be able to implement things that my own ideas, versus maybe, like you said, working in a larger organization where you are sort of a smaller piece to a larger machine. You're kind of not a lot of opportunity to change processes. Is that sort of what you see as well? Is that your opinion?
I think it really depends on the individual. I think for each individual, they need to ask themselves, okay, do I love SOPs? Do I like the idea of knowing my exact job description and staying within those bounds? And do I want to go and execute this position in a way that's been executed before and kind of, meet expectations? Or do I want to kind of go out into the wild and help to figure something brand new out? I remember when I first got into research, I had some basic science research experience, no clinical experience. And I was on the job maybe 3 months, and my PI turned to me and said, okay, we have all this observational data, that we've collected over the years from individuals after motor vehicle collision. I want you to put together an intervention protocol. And I looked at him and I said, I've never done it before, but I can't wait to learn. Right. And that was my first taste of getting to do something that no one has ever done before. And I think some people thrive off of that, and other people are completely overwhelmed by that kind of task. And there's no right or wrong. It's just where you thrive as an individual. And so I think, if you're listening out there, you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I want to take my career? You can move in all of these different directions. You have to learn how to market yourself for the appropriate entity that you're going after. But if you're just getting started, there's no right or wrong answer, but you have to ask yourself, do I thrive in an environment with those SOPs where I do have a very standard, clear-cut idea of what's expected of me? Or do I want to go out there as a pioneer?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm probably more of the pioneer route than the let's fit into an existing system. But I totally agree. I think sometimes working in an environment where you do have to be challenged to do something maybe that you've never done before, for some that can be quite daunting, and that's totally fine. And I think that some people get caught up and think, oh, I need to be better. I need to be more of a risk taker. I need to take on new challenges. But there's a place for everyone. You just got to find the place that's right for you. And sometimes if you're more, on that side of the fence, Working in a bigger organization with lots of other individuals, you're going to learn a lot more. You're going to be able to be involved in those processes. Whereas in a smaller organization, maybe you're going to have to show a little bit more initiative and maybe be a little bit more autonomous. So
absolutely. And I'd say in any of those types of positions you're going for, whether it's in like the big organization or the small, scrappy 2-person operation, figure out what that organization needs. Like, what are their pain points? What can you come in and help them with? Write that in your cover letter, message someone on LinkedIn who's at the organization and say, hey, here's how I can help solve your problem. Maybe they love your plan, maybe they don't, but at least you're thinking about how to help the company. And I think that can get your foot in the door.
I bet you have some great tactics for how to market yourself and get the job that you want. But maybe that's another discussion for another day. We'll get you back on. For the last few minutes, we've been talking a little bit about like the employee experience or the potential employee experience and sort of the individual. If we flip it back to the folks that are maybe that in those leadership roles at these sort of smaller organizations that have plans to grow, when you're looking out to sort of build that team, you mentioned, your first hire really should be that sort of entrepreneurial, scrappy type individual that's really going to be able to pull everything together and be the go-getter that goes out there and moves the needle forward. After you've got that individual in place, like what else are you looking for if you're a director or a VP of ClinOps as you start to build out that team, knowing that maybe in a year's time, maybe less, you're going to have to start, some clinical programs and get involved in those types of activities?
Right. So you kind of first need that big picture person who can put in place like the business plan, the vision, and see how you're going to move forward. And then you need people who can just get the job done. Right. Then, you're still hiring for those transferable skills, but those transferable skills are, can you check these boxes on this checklist that we have? Can you move this forward? Can you not just meet deadlines, but get your stuff done well in advance of that deadline, right? Those small companies have to move quickly. If they don't, boom, someone else has already eclipsed them. So get that big like visionary in place first. But that person has to be able to then manage that group of, I hate the term worker bees, but for lack of a better term, people who can just get it done.
And I think this was something that we talked about before today's discussion, which was about making sure that the people that you hire have a good understanding of the big picture and the mission for the organization. Is it important when you're a ClinOps leader building out that team for the first time to really help translate that big picture into what it means from a clinical perspective? And then I would guess you're kind of building a roadmap for your team based on what that transition looks like. So I'm going to be doing this in 6 months time or a year's time, and I'm going to need these jobs to be done. Is that how you would kind of build out like what team you need to build and what your team looks like?
Oh, I think so, right? So that visionary person also should have a very clear idea of what the organization's mission is. Every person onboarded beyond that person needs to be really well-versed in that mission. And I think make it explicitly clear, hey, we're going to ask you to do X, Y, and Z documentation. Here's how it ties back to our mission. Thanks for your hard work on it. And make sure you say thanks. That keeps them coming back and doing more hard work, right? Tie every task back to that mission. And I think when you're onboarding, set that foundation really strongly right out of the gate. I'll give you a quick example that has nothing to do with clinical research. So there was a summer that I worked at the Container Store. Aside from the really nice discount, as a person who just like worked the floor, right, just retail worker, they sent us all through a 5-day course on just what they call their foundation principles. Like, what does the Container Store stand for? And it still to this day has made such an impression on me because I'm thinking like, well, I'm just like a part-time employee selling like shoe boxes and hangers. Like, why are you telling me about the mission? But then when we're out on the floor and we're connecting to the customers, that mission rings true and we're going back to those foundation principles. So if you want your employees to do a really good job, I know it might sound trite at this point, a lot of companies say this, but you have to take care of your team so they take care of the jobs, take care of your clients, whomever you're interfacing with. So in this situation, if you're that small company and now maybe you have 4 or 5 people working for you total, if they connect to the mission and you say thank you back to them, you are going to get some really great work done very efficiently.
I love that because I think often what tends to happen is that, you build a team and as the organization grows, more hierarchies put in place, there potentially are more levels that be put in place. And at that point, the distance from the company mission, the vision, why they exist, what their objectives are, becomes larger, right? And so, if you're building out that team, maybe some of the I don't like to use the word junior roles, but maybe some of the latest hires that come in, if they don't get that perspective, they're not going to be able to understand what they need to do or what they need to change in the way that they work to support that objective. So I think orientation naturally is important when someone joins an organization, to give them that perspective. But like you said, also feedback throughout the process, giving them an understanding of, if something changes at the business level, what impact does that have on the way that they work, or how can they contribute to it? And as new objectives are added, how does that work, at their level? So I really, really love that. I have a follow-up question that kind of builds on this kind of building a team out there. In the clinical trial landscape has been international for a very long time. And then I think that also COVID threw us into this remote work area where we couldn't go to the office. And so that forced teams, obviously we've got to continue running businesses. We've got to continue, pushing clinical trials forward. A lot of teams went remote. Some did well, some didn't. How do you feel about building out a remote team? And are there any sort of recommendations that you would have for a smaller organization that is looking to be successful in building maybe a remote team because you just can't find the resources locally?
I mean, I love it, because now you have been able to open up your candidate pool to really get the cream of the crop for your organization. You're not just hiring people only in Pittsburgh or only in Dallas. You're like, hey world, who's available? Now the onus is really on you to choose great people.
Yeah.
Now, once you get those people, like we were just saying, you have to onboard them really, really well and make them feel connected to the organization. But I think more than that, make them feel connected to the people they are working with. It's too easy to become isolated in this remote world. So kind of tying together a few of these things, I know internally at Fastrack, what we've done a couple years ago, now almost about 2 years ago, I believe, we revamped our entire internal culture mission statement. And so now we have these kind of guiding principles of collaborate, give, achieve, grow, and include. And with that, there's a lot of information that falls under each of those. But what we do is we are able to nominate people internally who are demonstrating these principles every day in their work. And then we recognize them company-wide and say, hey, Noah, we want to recognize you for grow. And hey, Janelle, we want to recognize you for include, because you're living out these principles. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, I want to win. I want to be recognized. And it kind of connects them to the company's mission, but also now to their manager and to other people in their department, and maybe even across departments. A manager from over here is now saying wow, really great job.
I love that, because I think a lot of people, especially during COVID, tended to kind of fall into let's run a game night or something like that, which can be useful, right? But if it's done too often, maybe it doesn't get the engagement you're looking for. But I think what you're suggesting here is building something that's more deep and intrinsic to the organization itself, and getting the team to buy into that and building programs from it, right? So I think that's a really good way to keep a remote or disconnected team, a team that's maybe across the country, engaged in, again, what we said before, the mission, the business, what we're trying to achieve, and what people are doing to express those values in what they do every day.
I think also, when you have, we're talking about smaller companies, it's easier the smaller you are for people in different departments to interface, because there's usually just one person in each department. You may not even call them departments yet. You're just like, hey, we all work here. And that's a little bit easier to pick up the phone maybe and call each other or get on a Zoom or something of that nature. But I think encouraging people, the bigger you get, to still reach out, that there's no boundaries, there are no lines. And that's, again, a great way for your organization to grow, because if maybe marketing is talking to your team that's out there developing your business plans, well, those things are going to go hand in hand. Those people need to be conversing with one another, but they may not see it on the surface. And all of a sudden, when we make those connections, the wheels start turning. I think that's one thing that's the hardest part of having remote employees, is still people crave a shared experience. They want to kind of go through something together. Remotely, that's hard. So as managers, as supervisors, as leadership, we have to create those opportunities for our employees to come together. Yeah, maybe it's that occasional game night, or maybe it's putting people on a project from different parts of the organization that wouldn't normally interface. All of a sudden they've bonded, they've gone through that together, and your organization is so much stronger for it. And as a bonus, those people tend to stay longer. You get some employee retention.
And I think one of the other things that we see a lot around employee retention, and I think it's even more important in clinical research, is around what you do to invest in your existing team, right? And I know that this is something that you're incredibly passionate about, mentorship, skill building. There are some things that you mentioned to me that I'm not gonna take away from you. But what are some of the tactics that you have seen work well and have been successful with building your internal team, like in terms of improving, investing in them, in their knowledge, in their skill sets? What are some of the things that you would suggest to other leaders that maybe are managing these teams today?
It's going to sound kind of funny in this remote world, but take time out to just eat lunch together. Now you might be across time zones. I know we are. I'm on East Coast. A lot of my team's on West Coast. So they're having breakfast. We're having lunch, but we're together again, just kind of chatting, kind of that water cooler talk that you miss from being in the office. From leadership, just saying thank you, just picking up the phone, shooting a quick text. Hey, I appreciate you. For what? For being you, for being awesome, for being part of this team, right? I love small gifts of appreciation. Everyone loves to get mail, right? You get a surprise in the mailbox from your company. How cool is that? Whether it's like some swag or just a box of brownies, like everybody loves that. All of a sudden you're connected back to your organization. I think too, right? As a company grows, there is just that natural tendency to disconnect from the mission, from leadership. You feel like a cog in the machine. So if you're listening, you're part of one of those big entities. Reach out to the people below you and say, "Hey, thanks, awesome work." It's going to take you a really long way there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you mentioned in our previous conversation was some of the things that you've helped put in place at Fastrack is around like building career paths and career ladders. Some of the listeners here might be trying to do that today and are looking for maybe some insights into how they can improve that area. What are some of the suggestions that you would make around building career paths for your team, for employee retention, but also for happiness and growth to support the business long term?
Yeah. If people don't have anything to aspire to, they don't have, a next step, it's more likely that they will leave. What comes next? Now, in a small organization, you might say, we don't have a career ladder. We only have the 5 people who work here. And I think it's really important to let those individuals know, we want you to grow here. Let's figure out what you're good at. Let's figure out how you contribute. And let's figure out what that next job is. Let's help you evolve into that. For instance, I just this morning, I have one of our team members. She's relatively new. She's been with us about 5 months. And we had her sit in and help lead part of something that a whole different aspect of the company is involved in. But we see potential for her to join our team. So we said, hey, come join us for an hour this morning. Help us lead this initiative. Now she's going back to her regularly scheduled day job the rest of the day. But hey, that was really cool that she got a glimpse of what she might be doing. And we're going to meet with her after and say, hey, what's your feedback? Did you like that? Is that something you could see yourself moving into? And if so, we're going to help her progress in that direction. If she says absolutely not, okay, we're going to help her evolve somewhere else because she's someone who's already adding immense value. And so we need her to know there's places for you to go here. We might not know that job title. We might not know those exact responsibilities, but let's figure it out together. And when you can do that as a small organization, those people are going to stick with you for a lot longer than they otherwise would.
And do you think that that's what contributes to sort of building a really great culture within a clinical team, like really giving that visibility and transparency? And if it is, anything else that you would say contributes to building a really great culture within a clinical group?
I mean, everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to feel like there's an open door. And that's why I think even, like to reference this person who's just been with us 5 months, she's the one who came to us and said, hey, I have this idea. I have that idea. And we said, wow, okay, this person's already trying to really add value, even though at our organization, she is the most entry level position. So someone like that who's brainstorming ideas for the organization, I'm going to hold on to her and I'm going to do everything I can to hold on to her, because if she's not giving us ideas, she's going to go and give someone else ideas. And I want that for us. I'm selfish here. I want that for our team. So I think, giving people a voice and a platform to be heard, and then letting them know, I hear you. Not saying you have to do everything they're suggesting, of course, but letting them know, I hear you, and this is why we can't do that at this time. Or I hear you, and that's in the works for the next year. Or I hear you, that's a great idea. Let's talk more about how we can implement that now.
If you were to kind of maybe change gears and think, we talked a lot today about building a clinical team and assuming that first person that comes in to build out a clinical group is that leader, right? That's maybe coming from a lot of experience. But oftentimes there might be an existing clinical team in place, maybe a handful of individuals, and then there's a new VP or a new director that's hired that is then going to inherit that team. What's some advice that you'd give to that new leader that's coming in to really make sure that you can start off on the right foot, but also make sure that you can have the impact that you're supposed to have as this new leader coming in? Because it's difficult, right?
That is a hard position to be in. You're coming in expected to be a leader. There's already this onus on your shoulders of you need to generate results, but there's a lack of, maybe not a lack of trust, just with the team you're going to be over. Who is this person? What experience do they have? What are you bringing to the table? Why were you selected? Why not someone internally getting elevated to that position? So I think the first thing is take out the garbage. By that, I mean literally, if you're in a physical office, take out the garbage. Show that you are willing to do the lowest level job that exists at that organization, right? Whatever it is. Now, everyone that you're managing, walk alongside them, sit with them. What's your day-to-day like? What's your job? Can I help you do it? Kind of get on their level, see what they are doing before you go in and try to manage what they're doing. I think you got to be that teammate before you can be that leader. You have to gain that trust. And when they see that you are willing to come in early, stay late, put in the hard work, take out the garbage, brew the coffee, clean up after whatever, when they see in this virtual world that you're willing to pick up the phone and call them, when they see that you're saying, hey, you said your kid's sick. Why don't you take the afternoon with your kid and let's catch up tomorrow morning. Okay, all of a sudden you're connecting with that person as a person. They're not seeing you as like, oh, man, this person's going to come in and just tell me what to do. They're going to screw up my workflow. They don't even know what we do here. Get to know what they do and hear, hey, what's working about what you do? What's not working? Let's be in this together to make what we're doing better.
Yeah, I think it's a really great opportunity for that new leader coming in to build trust within the existing group by understanding what, like you said, what's working today and what's not working today, and make the people that you're going to be working with understand that they have a voice and that you're interested in their opinion. That's going to go a ton further than coming in and saying, well, this is the way I've done it in other organizations, and this is the way I want you to work.
And it's going to take time. It's definitely going to take time. Like if you're coming in at that VP level, who's ever above you, make sure they know, hey, look, this is going to take a little bit of time for me to gain the trust of this team. So give me that grace period to get to know them, to earn their trust. Then we're going far. Buckle up.
I love that. And you said something earlier that really stuck out to me, because I think this happens quite often, where you said, you have to explain to the team members that you've just, you've joined the team, you've got this new team that you've inherited. Maybe there was someone internally that was vying for the position that you now fill, right? And they're asking themselves, why wasn't it me? Right? Why wasn't I selected for this? And maybe the powers that be never gave them that feedback. What advice would you give to the leader that's just coming in? And then conversely, what would be some of the advice that you'd give to that individual that's part of that organization that thought they were going to have an opportunity to step up, but maybe didn't get that opportunity?
I mean, and that there's so many layers to that, right? I mean, there's so many personal dynamics that could be at play. But I mean, at first, as the new leader, you got to get to know that person. Wow, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm glad you're still part of the team. Why don't you and I get to know each other a little bit more? I'd love to mentor you. Let's help you get to that step next time. Let's help you get there, right? Let me share with you a little bit about my experience and maybe why you had the edge over that internal candidate, or maybe you don't. but you kind of got to humble yourself to that person in particular, because there could be a lot of bad, bitter feelings there, but they're still on the team. And who knows, maybe they're looking for a new job, but they're still on the team. So if you come in and say, hey, look, obviously you have a lot of value to add here. Let's be on the same page, but you clearly have higher aspirations. So let's get you there. Let's help you get there.
And I guess also conversely, if you're on the other side of the shoe, where you're that individual that maybe thought that they were going to get that rise up in the role, I think something that I think is really important for that person to consider is to think, okay, understand the situation that you now find yourself in. You've got this new leader that's coming in. They're sitting in the seat that you were vying for, but ultimately didn't get it. The first thing you have to ask yourself is, well, what could I have done differently? What maybe did I not have in place that maybe not a great fit for that role? And have a lot of self-awareness, right? Think a little bit more about, what could I have done differently? What skills do I not have that I would need to have to be able to get there? But I think also you have to be humble to be able to say, this new individual that's coming in is actually an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity for me because they clearly have something that I don't have, and I can learn that from them. And second of all, they're going to be looking for someone that they can lean in on to give them the lay of the land, to help them understand. And that individual can position themselves as that right-hand man or woman to really make sure that they're positioning themselves well in the organization. And then that just makes it so much easier for you to have those conversations about growth internally, right? And how you can, move into new roles and be honest and open, because you've got that respect already, because they need you. They're moving into this new team. They don't know anyone, and you're the most experienced person on that team. They're going to lean into that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's such sound advice. I know in the moment it might be crushing when you get that no, you get that rejection, you get the we've chosen someone else over you. But also what an opportunity then to learn from someone else, to grow from someone else. Go back over your interview notes or talk to whomever you interviewed with and say, hey, can I just get some honest feedback on my interview on why you chose this person over me? I just want to learn so I can get better. So next time I am your choice.
It's amazing. Amazing. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I have one or two more questions for you. And the one question that I always love asking, because I get so many random answers, but they're so great, is do you have... Yeah, be nervous. Do you have an unpopular opinion or a hot take about your field that maybe people disagree with you, but this is just truly what you believe? Is there sort of an unpopular opinion within what you do that you'd want to share with me today?
I'm going to get in trouble with this one. All right. I'm going to make some enemies now. Yes, let's get adversarial. I think that the clinical research industry right now is in this golden era of identifying and complaining about problems, but we're not quite to the point where we're willing to solve them.
Okay, example?
Okay, so the reason I'm coming at you with this is I'm very active on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, your whole feed is littered with people pointing out problems. And those posts go viral. They get so many likes and reshares, and everyone's like, yeah, that is a problem. Absolutely. Without a doubt, I experienced that too. And then when there's solutions provided, crickets, right? And I think we are at this point. I think we're actually at this precipice of being ready to accept solutions, right? I'll give you an example. We right now recognize that we need to diversify the workforce. And everyone's like, yeah, diversify, let's do it. We're on board. Okay, we'll do it. And the organization's like, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we want to, but okay. Yeah, we're on board with the mission. Okay, well, live it out. Do it. Take that step. I think a lot of it is just lack of knowledge on how to do it. From Fastrack's perspective, right, we see this big problem with workforce shortage. Whoa, sites are understaffed, CROs are understaffed, pharma is understaffed, and there's this idea in the field, oh my gosh, well, all the site level staff, they're being, they're evolving into CRO positions, and those individuals are evolving into pharma, and everyone's kind of shuffling about, oh, but there's no one to hire. Well, there are. We are just looking for the same old candidates who just are caught up in this shuffle. We need to get outside of our bubble. So everyone's saying, this is a problem. We need to fix it. I think really what the industry needs to do is kind of take a step back and say, we need to reevaluate on a lot of these problems because solutions do exist out there. It's just not how we've solved them before. So I'd love to see the industry just be a little more proactive in those solutions, a little more vulnerable in saying, okay, we know this is what we need, but we don't know how to do it. Can someone help us? Right? There's people out there. I think every pharma company, every CRO now cites they have a head of D&I. Be vulnerable. Reach out. Say, hey, we're trying to diversify, but we don't know where to start. If you're understaffed, say, hey, we don't even know where to start because we keep posting the same job description and we keep getting the same types of people, and those people leave after 6 months to go to our competitor down the road. Okay, be vulnerable. Ask for help.
And do you think that that's born out of maybe fear of being different? Because I think that, we have a bad rap as an industry that we're sort of this risk averse, afraid of I don't want to say innovation because I think there's obviously a lot of innovation, but we're afraid of maybe doing new things or doing things differently the way that we've always done them. Do you think it's fear-based, or is it bigger than that? Is it more that it's just too big to move sometimes and there's just too many stakeholders for us to be able to make positive change? We have, so I'm sure that we follow the same people on LinkedIn. There's lots of people at the site level being much more vocal now than they've ever been, which I love.
Which is awesome.
But the rest of the stakeholder groups maybe aren't as vocal in those areas.
I think change has to come from the top down. And at this, in our field, that's going to be pharma down. How that happens, it's going to be slow. It's going to take those vulnerabilities. It's going to say, it's okay to identify your weaknesses, right? Right now, I think in the field, no one is willing to identify their weaknesses because, that means we lost a trial. That means we lost a contract. No, that just means it's an opportunity to get better, right? I hate the word weaknesses. Weaknesses is such negativity. No, it's an opportunity to get better. So yeah, we don't have that now, but help us grow, help us get better. And I think a lot of those resources have to come from pharma and trickle down.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I was mentioning, and maybe it was on the lines of, is it fear-based, right? Is it something that people are afraid of change? And maybe it is sort of a top-down because maybe the pressure at the top, at the sponsor level is there. But maybe in at least in my experience, maybe not always the level of experience, right? We outsource so much to CROs. The landscape of outsourcing is so diverse with so many different stakeholders that making a change has a lot of impact. And maybe there is that fear of, okay, if we change this, there's so many other things that we would need to do because they're impacting it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because if you think about clinical research, we are, by definition, always working in the future of medicine. Yet we tend to be very slow to adopt change, right? Like how many organizations out there are still using paper?
Oh, a lot.
I bet most. I bet a lot, right? We're like, we want to go everything. Oh, but that's really hard. And to make that transition is difficult. Okay, we'll do it eventually, right? So we're very slow to adopt change. But I think right now there is this shift. And I think a lot of it is due to sites having a voice now and saying, hey, this is what we need. Here are our vulnerabilities. So what I'd love to see are all of those kind of, I think a lot of it might just be like venting, pointing out the obvious, just saying, hey, here's what's going on in the industry. But I'd love for those voices to now really be heard and turned into action.
And I think there are a lot of initiatives, right? Like obviously we've got decentralized clinical trials, which is becoming, I'm trying to make sure that we don't call it a buzzword because I need it. I think we all need it to progress and move forward. But we've had phrases, we've had buzzwords in the past where there were opportunities for us to significantly improve the way that we're doing things. We talked about risk-based monitoring for a really long time, and I still think people are struggling to move some of those things forward. I'm hoping that decentralized clinical trials isn't the same. But I think you're absolutely right. It comes down to you have to take those risks. And like you said, we're taking a lot of risk in developing new drugs and therapies and devices, but we don't necessarily take the same risks when we're thinking about how our organizations operate and how all of the different stakeholders that we're working with operate. And it does start at the sponsor level because ultimately money talks and that's where it's coming from. And so it has to start at the sponsor level and then ultimately it will end up trickling down to everyone that's there. So
And that's going to just strengthen everything, quite honestly, right? Because at that site level, when it eventually trickles down, that's boots on the ground. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the participants are seeing the data's collected. Like nothing happens without really strong sites who are heard and recognized. So we're talking about building an organization today, right? Like, well, how do you scale and how do you bring on good people? But on a much grander scale, if you think about it, right, the sponsors are the top and they're trying to build these organizations of contracting out with CROs, then we have all these sites involved. Like those same principles hold true. And those sites need to sometimes hear, hey, thank you. Not, hey, you're behind on enrollment. What are you going to do about it? Right? Just, hey, thanks. You're awesome. Here's some brownies,
Who doesn't love brownies, right?
Exactly.
What a great way to finish today's discussion. Lauren, I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you today. I knew that this was going to be fun, but I didn't think it would be this fun. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. As we break up today for today's session, if people want to learn a little bit more about you, Lauren, maybe reach out to you if they want to learn more about the organization, where's the best place to connect with you directly?
LinkedIn, for sure. Find me there, Lauren Ballina Chang, or you can always head to our website or Instagram, whatever, but Clinical Research Fastrack. We're everywhere. We're out there supporting all of our partners. So if you need help, you need assistance, let us know. If you just want to have a fun conversation, I'm also game for that.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate your time today. For those that have been listening, thank you so much for listening to our conversation. There will be more coming soon, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ClinOps Power Hour. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Head out to YouTube to listen to the full episode. If you want to share or download the episode, you can do so. Share it with a colleague or friend if you feel like they'd be interested. And of course, if you ever want to get in touch to be a guest or a speaker on the podcast, feel free to reach out to us at montreum.com. If you want to see other great content, you can head over to Montreum's LinkedIn page or over to our website at montreum.com to see that great content. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thank you.